Alright, so these are my zucchini, and there's two things that are really important to do in the garden right now, and one of them is check for bugs, so bug control, and then one of them is making sure there's plenty of airflow through your plants. So with squash, the main problems that I have with squash are the squash bug. So I come out here now because I know they're on their way, and I'll be starting to get the squash bugs any minute, so I can look at the base, see if I can find any squash bugs. And then I look under to see if there's any eggs. So far I haven't found anything. So it's so much easier to deal with a squash bug infestation if you catch them early. If you catch them early, you're not going to have a huge problem. You let them go, they can get bad really, really fast. So once I start to see them, I will pick off the adults, and then I will get the eggs. The eggs are usually underneath or on the stem. I'll get them off with tape, and I'm just pretty vigilant. I do this several times a week, and I have to do that throughout the whole season. One other thing I deal with squash is powdery mildew, and it usually doesn't set in until maybe the end of July when it gets more humid and more hot. But I want to keep on top of it this year because last year I kind of let it go and it got really bad. So with powdery mildew, it's important to keep the airflow, so I like to come in here and take off any leaves that might be damaged, like maybe this one. If there's just too much, like this one, I'll take a few leaves off here and there just so there's good airflow throughout the whole plant. Another thing is when you water, try to water right at the base. I have these sprinklers and sometimes they get on top, but if I water in the morning, it usually dries out by the time the evening comes. But if it does come in, just take off the infected leaves, throw them away or burn them. And I also use a baking soda with a little bit of soap spray on them, on the good leaves, so that it doesn't spread. But this year I'm going to try spraying these leaves once a week maybe, or once every other week, just to try to avoid it, and we'll see if that helps. I also do the same thing to my melon or climbing vines. So what I did today is I just kind of took a lot of the leaves off at the bottom, just so there's plenty of airflow, and as it goes up the trellis. I do the same thing with my tomatoes. Look here, they're about a foot off the ground, especially indeterminate tomatoes. They're about a foot off the ground with no leaves touching the ground, and I've got the ground mulched with some grass mulch, and that helps with the early blight and the late blight, so it doesn't get up to the leaves. So I like to just wander around and check for any bug damage or any kind of problem, and then I try to determine what it is and either set up traps or do whatever I think that I need to do to help minimize damage from that. These are my cucumbers, so I've kind of done the same thing, is I've taken some of the leaves off the bottom when it gets too crowded. So far though, everything's looking pretty good. I can start to see some climbers on this part that was infected most by the pill bugs. I have a section on the other side that's still really suffering, but this was the worst on this side. And there are things I do every year for my apricot and peach trees, and that is right when these start to turn orange, I put up earwig traps, because the earwigs will climb up the tree and they'll get into about 75% of all of my apricots, and the trees are loaded this year. But if I put the earwig traps out, then I hardly have any earwigs in my apricots. So we will do that as soon as these apricots start to turn orange, and same with the peaches. So my main message is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's important to catch things early. If you catch things early, it's a lot easier to take care of things than if you let it go. And a lot of times you can lose plants if you let things go. So be vigilant, go out there, march through your gardens at least a couple times a week. I do it every day because I love being in my garden, but make sure you're watching out for things.